Hello, welcome to ICE's Big Questions. Today we're going to talk about abortion and what Christians believe about this issue. Now, this is a very sensitive subject, so please be aware that we're going to talk about some difficult and potentially triggering issues. So my name is Doug, and we're here with Caitlin and Unita and Hannah. So, the Oxford Dictionary defines abortion as the deliberate ending of pregnancy at an early stage. So in the UK, having an abortion is legal up to 24 weeks, and that's just totally the mum's decision. An abortion can take place after 24 weeks, but two doctors have to agree, and there has to be a significant risk to the child's life, or the mother's life, or a serious risk of disability for the child to be born.
So this is obviously a really big issue, and many people feel really strongly one way or the other. So in the media, the debate is framed as people usually belonging to one of two camps. So there's pro-life, which is where people think that abortion is equivalent to murder and it's not okay. And then there's pro-choice, which is where people think that abortion is okay because of the emotional and the physical toll that being pregnant and raising a child takes on the mother. So at its core, this is a debate about human rights. Every human has the right to life and the right to freedom. But this debate is around when this group of cells called a fetus becomes a human and therefore has the same rights to life as a human. So some would say that this happens from the moment of birth, some would say that this happens when the baby can survive on its own, some would say that this happens when the baby's heart starts beating, and some would say that this happens as early as conception.
Yeah, so for many Christians, they would actually say that they are pro-life, but not all of them. So for Christians, the debate isn't really about pro-life or pro-choice, it's whether abortion is an absolute moral issue or relative moral issue, and what this basically means is abortion wrong in every single circumstance, or are there some situations where abortion can be allowed?
Yeah, that's really great. So let's start with the absolute moral issue argument. The majority of Christians find themselves to be part of that group that includes Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, just a lot of different groups. They believe that human life starts at conception, so therefore this group of cells has human rights from that moment on. They also believe that God made us in His image as something that's different to all the animals and plants that He created. That He also breathed life into us, which means that life is a gift from God, that it's really sacred and valuable. Unlawful killing or murder is wrong in general, so why is it okay to murder an unborn human being who can't even defend itself? The Catholic Church believes this. Human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. From the first moment of its existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent being to life.
Another part of the argument is how quickly this group of cells becomes something that looks like a human. So after 2 weeks, the fetus has brain cells. After 4 weeks, or around 4 weeks, the fetus's heart starts beating by itself and its blood supply is independent from the mother. By 6 weeks, you can record the fetus's brainwaves. By 8 weeks, all the fetus's organs are operating by themselves other than the lungs. And at 24 weeks, if the fetus is born, even though it will be very premature, it has a 50% chance of surviving on its own. People on this side of the debate often point out that when someone has died, you consider them dead after brain activity has stopped, or after their heart has stopped beating. But for around 6 weeks, a fetus has these things, so should we not consider it to be alive?
So these Christians also believe that there are a few exceptions where it's okay to have an abortion. For example, if the pregnancy is imposing a serious risk on the mother's health, or for example if they find cancerous cells in the mother's womb. So some Christians have very strong beliefs about this, and they will also protest outside abortion clinics and lobby for it to be made illegal. They also look for alternatives for abortion, for example, adoption. Christians are actually twice as likely to adopt a child than non-Christians. Christians also believe that sex is a physical union of marriage, of two people becoming one, so therefore they're minimizing the risk of unwanted pregnancies.
However, there are circumstances which move against this absolute argument. For example, what if the mother was raped? So she had no control over getting pregnant, but now she has to live and suffer with the consequences of poor mental health maybe as a result of a traumatic event which has resulted in pregnancy. Furthermore, whilst it's interesting to point out how close a fetus is to a human being early on in pregnancy, actually 20 to 25% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, and a lot of these happen in the first 12 weeks. And before 24 weeks, it's unlikely that the fetus would survive on its own.
In response to these issues, Some Protestant Christians would now argue that abortion is more of a relative moral issue rather than an absolute moral issue. The Church of England, for example, they're the largest Christian denomination in the UK, and they believe the Church of England combines strong opposition to abortion with a recognition that there can be strictly limited conditions under which it may be morally preferable to any available alternative. This is based on our view that the fetus is a human life with the potential to develop relationships, think, pray, choose and love. Essentially, there may be more cases where abortion may be more permissible than other Christians may believe. There's also a greater consideration now to the mother's right and how a pregnancy may actually affect her as well. Abortion should be decided on a case-by-case basis rather than a blanket no over them all. Furthermore, the Church of England also believes that the scale of abortions taking place each year is also a symptom of a greater social problem. Long-term methods must involve strategies to avoid conception, such as good sex education accompanied by good relationship education for both boys and girls, increasing hope and choices for girls in areas of deprivation, decreasing poverty, and a climate where people talk about responsible relationships, rather than viewing abortion as a readily accessible solution to personal or social problems.
Yeah, and we know that in places with free healthcare, abortion rates are far lower than places without free healthcare. However, overall, these Christians still find themselves closer to pro-life than pro-choice. For example, having an abortion because there is a high chance of the child being born with a disability is not justified either. Human life, no matter if they're disabled or not, is precious and valuable and needs to be protected. So in summary, most Christians are pro-life. They believe that human life is precious and valuable and needs to be protected, especially those most vulnerable. The disagreement comes between whether or not this is an issue that's always wrong, or an issue that, depending on the case, can sometimes be allowed. Of course, there are counter-arguments to this from different viewpoints outside of Christianity, but this was about what Christians believe. But what do you think?